The sun hung low over the dusty horizon of the desert planet, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep crimson. A dry wind whispered across the empty plains, carrying with it the scent of scorched earth and the faint tang of distant minerals. In the midst of this harsh landscape stood a lone ranch, its wooden beams creaking in the wind. Inside, a man sat hunched over a small cot, rocking a crying baby in his arms. Eli's hands were rough and calloused, marked by years of labor. But they were gentle now, as he soothed his daughter, Luma. Her tiny fists waved in the air, and her bright eyes searched for comfort. "It's all right, little one," Eli murmured, rocking her slowly. "Papa's here. We'll be all right." The ranch was quiet, except for the low hum of an old generator struggling to provide electricity. Most of the colony's resources were sent to larger settlements, leaving Eli to manage alone. The walls were bare, the furniture sparse, but every corner of the room carried memories of his late wife. Mara's laughter echoing faintly in his mind. The loneliness was heavy, pressing down on him. But the sight of Luma reminded him why he couldn't give up. Days on the frontier were long, and survival was never simple. Eli had learned to adapt. He had built the ranch from nothing, using scavenged metal and wood from abandoned mining outposts. His livestock were hardy creatures, capable of enduring the harsh climate, but they still needed careful tending. Water was precious, stored in tanks and recycled carefully. And food was rationed. Yet despite the challenges, Eli felt a quiet pride. He was a man who could survive where many would fail. This morning had begun like any other. Eli had risen before dawn to check the solar panels and the water filtration unit. Both were functioning, though not perfectly. Luma had been restless through the night, waking frequently for food, which had left him exhausted. Now, as he bounced her gently, he allowed himself a moment to dream of better days. Days when the colony might thrive, when the wind didn't bite so sharply, and when he wasn't completely alone. Outside, the ranch stretched into the desert, a tiny dot of life in a vast sea of sand and rocks. The sky above shimmered faintly with two suns, one brighter than the other, casting a strange dual light across the plains. Eli had come to understand these suns as companions in their own way. They were consistent, predictable, unlike the people he had lost. Yet even in their harsh glow, he found beauty. Each sunrise reminded him that life, no matter how fragile, endured. Luma whimpered again, breaking his reverie. Eli sighed, pressing a hand to her back. "I'll get you something to eat, little one," he said softly. His supplies were low. The food ration packs, stored in the metal locker, were dwindling faster than he had anticipated. The colony supply ship wasn't due for another month, and traveling across the desert to meet it was risky. Bandits, storms, and equipment failure made the journey dangerous, even for someone like Eli. He prepared a small bottle, warming the formula as best he could. Luma drank eagerly, her tiny hands clutching at his chest. Eli watched her, fascinated by the intensity of her little existence. She was entirely dependent on him. And in that dependency, there was a strange kind of joy. He had faced countless hardships alone, but the responsibility for Luma gave him purpose. It drove him to endure the desert, to mend broken machinery, to find clever solutions for survival. After feeding her, he laid Luma in the cot beside the window. She yawned, curling up under the thin blanket, eyes already closing. Eli lingered, staring out at the desert. The wind carried whispers of distant storms, and he felt the pull of solitude keenly. He had lost Mara nearly 2 years ago, a victim of illness when medical help had been days away. The memory still haunted him, and the loneliness had at times felt unbearable. Yet he had persevered, raising Luma in the way he knew best, blending determination with care. The ranch wasn't just a home, it was a fortress against the merciless world outside. Eli's hands had built fences, dug water wells, and reinforced the roof against sandstorms. Every day was a battle against the environment, and he fought with cleverness rather than brute strength. He had learned to read the clouds for signs of rain, to track the movement of desert creatures for food, and to improvise repairs when machines failed. Humans were fragile, but he had come to understand that their ingenuity, patience, and stubbornness were their greatest weapons. Despite the challenges, Eli found small joys. In the late afternoon, he wandered to the barn, brushing dust off the animals, checking the water troughs, and whispering to the livestock. "Easy, girls," he said, stroking the coarse fur of a desert-hardened cow. They responded in kind, their quiet presence offering companionship that even the harshest silence of the desert couldn't erase. Luma often accompanied him, strapped in a sling against his chest. She gurgled happily as he hummed softly, her laughter a small, radiant light in his otherwise harsh world. Evenings were the hardest. As darkness fell, the wind grew colder, and the isolation pressed down. Eli lit lanterns inside the small house, the flickering flames casting warm shadows across the walls. He prepared a simple meal from his dwindling rations, grateful for each bite. While eating, he thought of Mara, her laughter, her warmth, the dreams they had shared for their daughter. He knew he could never replace her, but he could honor her memory by surviving, by giving Luma a life full of hope. That night, as Eli tucked Luma into bed, he noticed something unusual, a faint glimmer in the distance. The desert, normally empty and quiet at night, seemed to pulse with a strange energy. He frowned, stepping outside to see better. The twin moons reflected off the dunes, creating shadows that danced like living things. Eli squinted, trying to determine the source. It wasn't a storm, nor the reflection of any familiar machinery. Something or someone was approaching. He returned inside quickly, his mind racing. The ranch had been empty for years. Visitors were rare, and usually unwelcome. He positioned himself near the door, ready to greet or defend against the unknown. Luma stirred, sensing his tension, and Eli held her close. "Whatever it is," he whispered, "we'll face it together." Moments later, there was a soft, deliberate knock at the door. Eli froze. His heart raced. Visitors this far from the colony were almost unheard of. Who could it be, in this lonely corner of the desert? He moved cautiously toward the door, peering through the small window. Standing there was a woman, tall and sturdy, wearing clothes that marked her as a traveler from one of the larger colonies. She carried a small bag, and her expression was kind but determined. Eli's first instinct was caution. He had faced danger before: bandits, wild animals, even sandstorms, but something about her presence felt different. She was not a threat, at least not an obvious one. Taking a deep breath, he unlocked the door and opened it a crack. "Hello," the woman said softly. "My name is Mara. I heard about you and your daughter. I can help." Eli blinked, taken aback. The desert had been quiet for too long, and the sudden arrival of another human was almost surreal. "Help? How?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. "I can feed her," she said, glancing at Luma. "And I can teach you ways to make life easier here. You don't have to struggle alone." Eli's heart pounded. Could this stranger be trusted? Yet, something in her eyes, a mix of compassion and determination, made him nod slowly. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps life on the frontier didn't have to be so lonely. He stepped aside, letting her in. As she entered, the warmth of human presence filled the small ranch, and Luma cooed, reaching out to her. Eli watched silently, wondering if this unexpected visitor would truly change their lives, or if the harsh desert had simply played a trick on him. But deep inside, he felt that, for the first time in a long while, survival was no longer the only goal. Perhaps thriving was possible too. The night outside continued, quiet and mysterious. But inside the ranch, a new story was beginning, one that would test their courage, ingenuity, and humanity in ways neither could yet imagine. The morning sun climbed slowly over the horizon, scattering golden light across the desert plains. Inside the small ranch, the air smelled faintly of fresh water and dried herbs. Eli sat at the worn wooden table, Luma sleeping peacefully in her small cot nearby. Last night's visitor, Mara, had stayed only a few hours, sharing stories of distant colonies and leaving behind a small packet of dried food and a few clean cloths for Luma. She had promised to return the next day. Eli couldn't stop thinking about her. There was something different about Mara, something more than kindness. She carried knowledge of survival that went beyond what he had learned on this harsh planet. Yet he also felt cautious. Out here, trust had to be earned. Still, the thought of another person being willing to help him sparked a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. He moved carefully around the room, tidying dishes and checking the supplies. The dried food Mara had left was simple but nourishing. Eli poured some into a bowl and placed it near Luma's cot. She stirred, blinking at him with sleepy eyes, then smiled as he picked her up. "You're getting stronger," Eli said softly. Mama would be proud. The baby's gurgles filled the quiet room, and Eli felt a small but real joy. Despite the loneliness, despite the constant battle against the desert, there was life here and he was part of it. He took a deep breath and looked out the window. The desert was vast, endless, and unyielding. Yet he felt, for the first time in years, that maybe he wasn't completely alone. Later that morning, as the suns rose higher, a soft humming sound reached his ears. Eli paused and tilted his head, listening. The hum grew louder and rhythmic, almost mechanical. He stepped outside, squinting against the brightness, and saw a small, hovering vehicle approaching over the dunes. Dust swirled beneath it, glinting in the sunlight. Eli's first thought was danger. Most travelers avoided this isolated area, and a sudden arrival usually meant trouble. But as the craft landed, a ramp extended, and Mara stepped out, smiling warmly. In her hands, she carried a box filled with supplies, clean water, nutrient-rich food, and even small hydroponic seedlings. "Good morning, Eli," she said cheerfully. "I brought some things that might help." Eli's mouth went dry. I wasn't expecting you so soon." Mara shrugged lightly. "I figured it would be easier if I showed you in person. You've been managing alone, but there are ways to make life easier here. You don't have to struggle so much." Inside the ranch, Mara unpacked her supplies carefully. Eli watched, amazed at how organized she was. The food was simple, but dense with nutrients. The seedlings were hardy varieties that could grow even in harsh soil. She even had a small water filter, compact yet efficient, that could purify water faster than his old system. "Why? Why are you helping me?" Eli asked quietly. Mara met his gaze. "Because someone once helped me when I needed it. And I believe in paying that forward. Humans can survive anywhere, Eli, but we do it better when we share knowledge. You've done an amazing job raising Luma on your own, but you don't have to do it all alone." Eli swallowed hard. He wanted to thank her, but words felt small. Instead, he nodded, letting her continue. Over the next few hours, Mara taught him simple but clever techniques for survival. She showed him how to plant the hydroponic seedlings using minimal water, how to rotate the crops to maximize growth, and how to keep the animals healthy with limited resources. Eli listened intently, absorbing every detail, but he didn't just follow her instructions blindly. He adapted them to the ranch, using his own ingenuity to improve the methods. By midday, the ranch already looked different. Small trays of seedlings lined the windowsill, soaking up sunlight. A few containers of filtered water stood ready for Luma and the animals. Even the barn seemed tidier, with makeshift feeding stations Mara had suggested but Eli had modified to fit his livestock. As they worked, Luma crawled around the floor, her laughter echoing through the small space. Eli felt a surge of happiness. The combination of Mara's knowledge and his own experience was already making a difference. It was a reminder that humans were resilient, capable of solving problems even in the toughest conditions. When they paused for a simple meal, Mara spoke of her travels. She had visited colonies across multiple planets, always helping families adapt to harsh environments. Her stories were fascinating humans thriving in floating cities, in icy tundras, and even underwater domes. But through all her tales, one theme remained clear. Human creativity and perseverance always found a way. You see, Eli, she said, handing him a small bowl of stew. Humans can survive almost anywhere, but the real magic is how we adapt, how we find solutions no one else can think of. That's what makes us strong. Eli nodded slowly, thinking about his own experiences. Every repair he had made, every storm he had survived, every day he had kept Luma fed and safe, it all came down to the same thing: human ingenuity. And now, with Mara's help, they could take it even further. The afternoon passed quickly. Mara helped Eli install a small solar heater to warm the water for Luma, and she suggested creating a simple wind trap to capture water from the desert air. Eli built it using scrap metal and ropes, marveling at how efficient it worked. Luma crawled nearby, fascinated by the moving parts, and Eli laughed softly, feeling a rare lightness in his heart. As evening approached, dark clouds began forming on the horizon. The wind picked up, carrying a fine layer of sand that dusted the ranch. Mara noticed it immediately. "A storm is coming," she said. "We need to make sure everything is secure." Together, they worked quickly. Eli reinforced the roof, tied down the seedlings, and secured the animals in the barn. Mara helped, but it was Eli's deep knowledge of the ranch and his experience with desert storms that made the preparations effective. By the time the first gusts of wind hit, the ranch was ready. They watched as the storm rolled in, the sky turning a deep, angry gray. Lightning flashed in the distance, and thunder rumbled across the desert. Yet inside the ranch, there was safety. Luma slept soundly in her cot, oblivious to the chaos outside. Eli and Mara sat together, quietly sipping water, grateful for the small victory. "You did all of this," Mara said softly, "even without me. I only showed you how. You're capable of more than you realize." Eli looked at her. The desert storm reflected in his eyes. "I had to survive. For Luma. But I didn't know I could make it look so easy." Mara smiled. "It's never easy. But humans are clever. We adapt. We endure. And sometimes, we even thrive." The storm raged through the night, but the ranch held firm. Eli realized that, for the first time in a long while, he wasn't alone. Mara's arrival had changed the dynamic, but it was his own ingenuity, combined with her guidance, that had made the difference. He felt a sense of pride, not just in surviving, but in thriving under the harshest conditions. As dawn approached, the storm subsided. The desert lay quiet once more. But the ranch had been transformed. Small green seedlings peeked from the trays, water traps glistened with captured moisture, and the animals stirred happily, oblivious to the challenges they had faced. Eli held Luma in his arms and looked at Mara. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For everything. For everything." "You don't need to thank me," she replied. "You did this. I only helped guide you. That's what humans do. We help each other. And we keep going." Eli smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. For the first time, he felt hope for the future. The desert was still harsh, the world still challenging. But with knowledge, ingenuity, and a little help, life could not just continue, it could grow. And for Luma, that meant a future full of possibilities. As the suns rose, their light danced across the desert, illuminating the small ranch in a warm glow. Eli, Mara, and Luma sat together, looking out over the endless sands. A new chapter had begun, one built not just on survival, but on cooperation, cleverness, and the unyielding spirit of humans. The frontier was still unforgiving, but for the first time, Eli felt ready to face it not alone, but with someone who understood that survival was only the beginning. The morning light spilled across the desert like warm honey. The storm from the previous night had left the sand cool and firm, glistening faintly where water had touched it. Eli stepped outside, holding Luma in his arms. She yawned and stretched, her small hands curling around his finger as she explored the world with innocent curiosity. Mara was already at work. She had set up the hydroponic trays along the side of the ranch, carefully adjusting them to catch the maximum sunlight. The small plants, delicate shoots of green in the endless beige of the desert, looked almost magical. Eli watched her for a moment, admiring her determination and precision. "You're up early," he said, setting Luma on a soft mat he had prepared. She began crawling toward the trays, fascinated by the vibrant colors. "I wanted to start teaching today," Mara replied, glancing at him with a bright smile. "These plants are going to change how you survive here. But you'll need to learn how to care for them properly." Eli nodded. He had seen humans survive through grit and toughness. But Mara's approach was different. It relied on observation, clever planning, and efficiency tools he had used before, but never in this organized way. They worked together in silence for a while. Mara explained how the seedlings needed precise water levels, just enough light, and protection from the harsh winds. She showed Eli how to recycle water carefully, collecting it from condensation traps and filtering it for use in the trays. Eli listened, absorbing every detail, but his mind was already turning, thinking of ways to improve her system. By mid-morning, Eli had rigged a small shade cover using scrap metal and cloth. It allowed the plants to receive morning sunlight while protecting them from the hotter afternoon rays. Mara looked impressed. "You're clever," she said. "You don't just follow instructions, you improve them. That's how humans survive in extreme conditions." Eli shrugged, but he felt a small spark of pride. He had always relied on his wits, on his ability to think differently. Now, paired with Mara's knowledge, their efforts could yield more than just survival. They could thrive. After finishing the plants, Mara turned her attention to Luma. She showed Eli how to prepare nutrient-rich food that was easy for a baby to digest, using ingredients they had on hand. Eli watched carefully, learning the techniques and making adjustments that fit his environment. Luma, curious as ever, reached out for the small spoon, giggling when it touched her lips. "This is amazing," Eli said softly. "I never thought we could have something like this out here." "Humans can adapt anywhere," Mara replied. "We're clever, resourceful, and patient. You've been surviving on your own. But together, we can do more than survive. We can grow." As the day passed, they continued their work. Eli repaired the old wind trap Mara had suggested, making it more efficient with extra panels to catch moisture from the air. He strengthened the fences around the livestock, and even built small toys for Luma from spare wood and rope, keeping her entertained while they worked. By afternoon, the ranch was alive with activity. The seedlings were protected, water flowed smoothly, and the animals were content. Mara watched Eli with admiration. He was strong, determined, and quick to adapt. Yet she also saw something deeper, a quiet optimism that refused to be beaten down by the harsh environment. "Your mind is like a tool," she said, smiling. "You see a problem, and start building a solution before anyone else even notices it." Eli chuckled. "It's the only way to survive here. The desert doesn't forgive mistakes." Luma crawled between them, her laughter brightening the small ranch. She picked up a small piece of cloth Mara had left, waving it happily. Eli felt a warmth spread through him. For so long, life had been about survival, about getting through each day without giving in to fear or exhaustion. Now, he realized, it could also be about joy. And Mara's presence had shown him that. As the suns began to set, casting long shadows across the dunes, Mara introduced a new lesson. She brought out a small solar heater and a reflective panel she had fashioned from lightweight metal. Together, they set it up to provide warm water for Luma and for cleaning. Mara explained how even small improvements could make a huge difference in living conditions, especially in a place as harsh as the desert. Eli watched carefully, then added his own idea. He angled the panel slightly differently, using his knowledge of the sun's paths to catch more sunlight during the day. Mara looked at him in surprise. "You're learning fast," she said, "and you're improving everything." That's exactly what humans do best, we adapt. The first night after all the improvements, the ranch felt almost like a sanctuary. Luma slept soundly, the animals rested, and Eli sat with Mara by the small fire they had built for warmth. "You know," he said, looking into the flames, "I thought surviving alone was the best I could do. I never imagined it could feel easier or better." Mara smiled. "It's not just about surviving, Eli. It's about growing. You've done an amazing job keeping Luma safe. Now, with some knowledge and clever thinking, you can do even more." Eli nodded slowly. The desert was still harsh, unforgiving, and lonely in many ways. But now, he had tools, knowledge, and a partner in Mara. And most importantly, he had hope. Over the next few days, their routine became a rhythm. Each morning, they tended the plants, checking water levels and sunlight exposure. Eli discovered that small changes, like rotating the trays or adjusting water flow, made a big difference. Mara taught him about soil nutrition, even in hydroponics, and he found ways to improve efficiency using simple machines he built from scraps. Luma thrived amid this environment. She grew stronger every day, her laughter echoing through the ranch as she crawled and explored. Eli marveled at how much a child could adapt and grow when given even a little care and nourishment. It reminded him why survival wasn't enough. There was joy in growth, and there was hope in possibility. One afternoon, Mara suggested a challenge. "I want you to think like a human inventor," she said. "Imagine the ranch as a small ecosystem. What can you do to make it work even better?" Eli smiled, feeling the spark of creativity he hadn't felt in years. He studied the ranch carefully. The wind trap could be larger. Water could be collected from condensation more efficiently. Animals could have a small shelter near the plants to provide natural fertilizer. By evening, he had a detailed plan in his mind. The next day, he started building. Mara assisted, but much of the work was his own innovation. Using scrap metal, ropes, and old machinery, he created a system that collected water from the desert air, redirected runoff to the seedlings, and provided shade for the baby and animals. Mara watched in admiration as he worked tirelessly, solving problems on the spot. By the end of the week, the ranch had transformed. Small green plants thrived, water was available for everyone, and Luma had plenty of space to crawl and explore safely. Eli looked around, pride swelling in his chest. This wasn't just survival, it was thriving, and it was all human ingenuity in action, observing, adapting, and improving. That evening, as the suns dipped behind the dunes, Mara and Eli sat outside, letting the cool desert breeze wash over them. Luma slept peacefully in her cot nearby. The desert was quiet, almost serene. And Eli felt a deep sense of satisfaction. "You've done well," Mara said softly. "Not just with the ranch, but with Luma. She's healthy and happy because of you." Eli smiled, brushing sand from his hands. "I couldn't have done it without you," he admitted. "You showed me what's possible. But it's amazing what humans can do when they try." Mara nodded. "Exactly. That's why I came here. To remind people that survival is just the beginning. Humans can adapt, improve, and even flourish in the toughest conditions. And you, Eli, are proof of that." As night fell, stars blinked across the clear sky, and the desert seemed less empty, less harsh. Eli realized that the frontier wasn't just a test of endurance, it was a canvas for ingenuity. And with knowledge, creativity, and a willingness to learn, humans could paint a future full of life, growth, and hope. Luma stirred in her sleep, reaching for the edge of the blanket. Eli lifted her gently, holding her close. "We'll keep going," he whispered. "We'll thrive out here. No matter what comes." Mara smiled, watching father and child. She knew that the desert would always be challenging. But with Eli's determination and cleverness, the ranch and the family would survive. And perhaps, one day, they would flourish beyond anything they could imagine. The night passed quietly, but for the first time, Eli felt that the desert wasn't an enemy. It was a challenge to be met, a puzzle to solve, and a place where humans, with their resilience and ingenuity, could make life not just possible, but meaningful. The desert dawn was quiet, almost deceptively calm. The twin suns rose slowly, warming the sand in gentle streaks of gold and amber. Eli stepped outside, carrying Luma in her sling. The baby yawned, blinking up at him sleepily, while the small seedlings in their hydroponic trays swayed slightly in the morning breeze. For the first time in weeks, the ranch felt almost peaceful, but Eli had learned long ago not to trust the calm. The desert could change in moments, turning from serene to dangerous without warning. His sharp eyes scanned the horizon, noting the faint dark streaks rising in the distance. Mara had been at the ranch early too, tending the plants and checking the water traps. When she noticed Eli's gaze, she frowned. "You're right," she said quietly. "That's no ordinary dust cloud. A storm is coming, and it's bigger than anything we've faced recently." Eli nodded. "We've prepared as best we can. But we'll need every bit of cleverness we've got." He set Luma down gently in her cot and walked toward the barn, inspecting fences, water containers, and livestock enclosures. His mind raced with ideas, analyzing the storm's potential path and the ways they could protect the ranch. Mara joined him, carrying a box of tools. "We'll need to reinforce the structures, but I think we can do it. We just need to work quickly." Together, they began securing the ranch. Eli directed Mara to anchor the hydroponic trays with extra ropes while he reinforced the fences. The wind started picking up, carrying fine grains of sand that stung exposed skin. Luma gurgled from inside, but Eli could see she was safe in her cot, swaddled in warm blankets. "This wind is stronger than last night," Mara said, her voice tense. "We'll need to protect the seedlings from being buried under sand." Eli nodded, scanning the yard. His eyes fell on an old solar panel frame that had been partially broken in the previous storm. He lifted it carefully, repositioning it as a wind barrier for the trays. Using rope and stakes, he anchored it in a way that the wind would pass around it instead of through it. Mara watched, impressed. "You're thinking ahead," she said. "That's exactly what we need. Quick adaptation and smart solutions." The storm arrived faster than they expected. Winds howled across the dunes, lifting sand in thick, blinding clouds. The twin suns disappeared behind dark, roiling clouds. Lightning flashed in the distance, and distant thunder shook the ground. Eli and Mara continued their work, shouting over the roar of the wind, checking each structure and barrier. Eli turned to the livestock, ensuring that each animal was secure. He had built small shelters near the barn walls, and the animals had instinctively moved inside. He felt a surge of pride his preparation had worked. Mara adjusted the water traps, preventing them from tipping over in the gusts. "Everything's holding so far," she shouted over the wind. But the worst is yet to come. Eli's mind raced. He knew that storms here could bring sudden sandslides, debris, and even damage to the water system. He scanned the ranch for weak points. The small wind trap he had built weeks ago for water collection seemed vulnerable. Without hesitation, he grabbed extra metal panels and reinforced it, improvising additional supports. Mara assisted, handing him ropes and tying knots where needed. The storm raged through the afternoon. Sand whipped against the walls. Lightning flashed closer, and the ground trembled with thunder. Luma slept peacefully, oblivious to the chaos outside. Eli and Mara worked tirelessly, their bodies covered in sand and sweat, but neither stopped. Every task required careful thinking, creativity, and quick adaptation. At one point, a particularly strong gust threatened to topple the hydroponic trays. Eli caught them just in time, holding them steady, while Mara reinforced the base. "We can't let the plants die," he shouted, sand stinging his eyes. "They're our future." Mara nodded, determination in her eyes. "And we won't." Hours passed like minutes as they battled the storm. Eli realized that their teamwork was as important as their preparation. Mara's knowledge guided them, But it was his ingenuity and quick thinking that allowed them to adapt to every unexpected challenge. He rerouted sand away from the water traps, using small channels he dug, preventing them from filling and spilling. He anchored additional fencing to redirect the wind around the livestock shelters. Every action was small, but together, they created a system that could withstand the storm. By evening, the storm began to subside. The wind slowed, the lightning faded, and the sand settled. Eli and Mara stepped outside, exhausted, but victorious. The ranch had survived, surprisingly intact. The hydroponic trays were partially covered in sand, but the plants themselves were unharmed. Water traps were full, animals were calm, and Luma slept soundly in her cot, undisturbed. Eli let out a deep breath, feeling both relief and pride. "We did it," he said softly. "I wasn't sure we could." Mara smiled, brushing sand from her hair. "We did. Because humans don't just survive storms. We adapt, we plan, and we act. And together, we're even stronger." They surveyed the ranch, noting minor damages they could repair over the next days. Eli realized something important. The storm had been a test, not just of structures and preparation, but of human ingenuity and cooperation. Alone, either of them might have struggled. But together, their combined knowledge, creativity, and determination had triumphed. That night, after repairing small damages and checking on the animals and seedlings, Eli sat outside with Luma in his lap. The desert sky was clear, stars sparkling above like distant fires. Mara joined them, sitting quietly and sharing the warmth of the fire they had built. "You know," Eli said, rocking Luma gently, "I used to think survival meant doing everything alone. I never realized how much stronger we could be with help and clever thinking." Mara smiled. "That's human nature. We're clever, resilient, and cooperative. You've proven that today. And the best part? You didn't just survive. You protected life, nurtured growth, and thrived in the process." Luma stirred, reaching for Eli's face with small, curious hands. He laughed softly, feeling a wave of happiness wash over him. In that moment, he understood something profound. Life was more than survival. It was about adaptation, ingenuity, and finding ways to flourish, even in the harshest conditions. Over the next few days, they continued to repair and improve the ranch. Eli implemented new designs for water collection, reinforced wind traps, and improved plant protection. Mara introduced small techniques for soil improvement and baby care that blended perfectly with his innovations. Together, they were creating a miniature ecosystem capable of thriving against the desert's harshness. Eli noticed subtle changes in himself. He felt more confident in his problem-solving, more aware of possibilities, and more inspired to create solutions rather than simply react to challenges. Mara's guidance had opened doors, but his own creativity had walked through them. And every success, no matter how small, reinforced the truth he had long suspected. Humans were remarkable when they applied knowledge, ingenuity, and persistence. One afternoon, as they inspected the improved water traps, Eli paused to look out over the dunes. The desert stretched endlessly, beautiful yet unforgiving. But he no longer felt fear. He saw opportunity. He saw a place where humans could thrive, a world where cleverness and courage could turn challenges into triumphs. Mara joined him silently, her presence comforting. "You've come a long way," she said softly. "Not just in building this ranch, but in realizing your own power. Humans are extraordinary, and you, Eli, are extraordinary too." He smiled, looking down at Luma playing nearby. I think I understand now. The desert isn't an enemy. It's a challenge. And challenges are what make humans strong." Mara nodded. "Exactly. And every challenge you overcome makes life better. Not just for you, but for everyone around you. That's what HFY humans being strong and clever truly means." As the suns dipped below the horizon, casting the desert in a soft golden glow, Eli felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't known in years. The storm had tested them, but it had also shown the power of human ingenuity, cooperation, and resilience. The ranch had survived, and more importantly, life had flourished within it. Luma giggled, crawling toward them with small, determined steps. Eli laughed, lifting her into his arms. "We did it," he whispered. "Together." Mara smiled, watching father and daughter. "And this is only the beginning," she said. "The future is full of possibilities." The desert night was calm, peaceful, and alive with promise. Eli realized that the frontier would always bring challenges, but with creativity, courage, and cooperation, humans could turn even the harshest world into a place of hope and growth. And in that realization, he found a new kind of strength, a strength that would guide him, Mara, and Luma through whatever the future held. The desert morning was calm and bright, with the twin suns casting gentle streaks of light across the sand. Eli stood outside the ranch, holding Luma in his arms, watching as the seedlings in their hydroponic trays glowed green under the sun. The storm from weeks ago seemed a distant memory, replaced by the quiet rhythm of thriving life. Mara moved beside him, carrying a small basket filled with fresh herbs and vegetables from their improved crops. The air smelled of warmth, water, and growth, a rare combination on a desert world. Eli felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Their hard work had paid off, not just in surviving, but in creating a home where life could flourish. "You've done an incredible job, Eli," Mara said softly. "This ranch isn't just surviving anymore, it's thriving. And it's all because of your determination and creativity." Eli smiled, brushing sand from his hands. "We did it together," he replied. "You showed me what was possible, but it's my own ideas and work that shaped it. And Luma? She's growing stronger every day." Luma reached out toward the small plants, her fingers brushing against the green leaves. She gurgled happily, her laughter echoing across the ranch. Eli felt a surge of pride. For so long, life had been about endurance, feeding Luma, repairing the ranch, and surviving the desert. Now, it was about growth, hope, and joy. The days had settled into a routine, but each day brought new discoveries. Eli had devised a small network of water channels to keep the plants hydrated without wasting a drop. Mara introduced him to new techniques for soil nutrition using compost from the animals, and together they created a closed system that allowed the ranch to flourish with minimal waste. Eli marveled at how humans could find clever solutions in even the harshest environments. One morning, as Eli checked the water traps, he noticed something unusual. A small cluster of desert creatures had approached the ranch. Drawn by the new growth, rabbits and small rodents explored the perimeter, carefully avoiding the livestock. Luma laughed as she watched them, pointing with tiny hands. Eli realized that the ranch had become more than a home, it had become a part of the desert ecosystem. Their ingenuity had created life in a place that had once been barren. Mara joined him, smiling. "Look at that," she said. "Humans don't just survive. They make life possible. That's what HFY is all about. We adapt, we improve, and we create thriving worlds." Eli nodded. "I see it now. Every step we took, every problem we solved, wasn't just for survival. It was to make life better. For Luma, for the ranch, and for anyone who comes after us." The ranch continued to grow. Eli built small shelters for the animals closer to the plants, allowing natural fertilization to help the crops. He devised a clever feeding system that recycled water from the animal troughs to irrigate the seedlings. Mara suggested small enhancements to improve efficiency, and Eli quickly adapted them, adding small inventions of his own that made the system even stronger. Luma thrived amid this activity. She learned to crawl across the soft sand and mats, laughing as she explored the small world they had built. Eli watched her, heart swelling. She was growing up in a place that had once been harsh and unforgiving. But now it was full of life, growth, and possibility. The child's joy reminded him why he had persevered. Human ingenuity and care could transform even the most barren world into a place of hope. One afternoon, Eli and Mara worked together on a small greenhouse structure they had improvised from leftover panels. The structure would allow them to grow more delicate plants, extending their harvest through the hottest periods of the year. Eli added clever ventilation holes that let air flow naturally while keeping the inside temperature stable. Mara adjusted the water drip system, and together, they watched as tiny sprouts began to grow inside. "This is amazing," Mara said, brushing sand from her hands. "It's incredible how much can be done when humans combine creativity with determination." Eli smiled. "It's just the start. There's so much more we can do here." He paused, looking out over the dunes. The desert is still tough, but now it feels alive, and we're part of it. As weeks passed, the ranch became more than a home, it became a hub of life. Small plants thrived in the sunlight. Water traps held liquid gold for the hot days, and animals roamed safely. Even Luma's laughter seemed to echo across the desert, a sign that life was flourishing. Eli realized that survival alone was not the measure of humanity. It was what humans created from the challenges around them. One evening, as the suns dipped toward the horizon, Eli and Mara sat outside with Luma between them. The desert was quiet, the air warm and calm. Eli reflected on the journey, the long, lonely nights, the storms, the constant struggle to keep Luma safe. And now, here they were, thriving in a place that had once been harsh and unforgiving. "You know," Eli said softly, "I never imagined life could be like this out here. For so long, it was just about surviving. But now, it's about growing, thriving, building something that lasts." Mara smiled. "That's the power of humans. We don't just endure. We adapt, we invent, and we create life wherever we go. And you, Eli, are a perfect example. You've taken what little you had and turned it into a thriving home." Eli looked at Luma, who reached for his face and laughed. He lifted her gently, holding her against his chest. "This is for her," he whispered. "Everything we do is for her future." Mara nodded. "And the future is bright, Eli. With humans, anything is possible. We can thrive in deserts, on icy worlds, and even in places no one thought we could survive. All it takes is ingenuity, care, and persistence." The desert night stretched across the horizon, stars sparkling like distant fires. Eli felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The ranch was safe, the baby was thriving, and the desert itself seemed less hostile. Life had grown from struggle, and he had been part of that transformation. Over the following months, the ranch continued to expand. Eli built small storage areas for supplies, improved the wind traps to collect even more water, and devised simple irrigation channels to feed both plants and animals. Mara continued to teach him new techniques for efficiency, and Eli continued to adapt them with clever adjustments. Luma grew stronger, more curious, and happier each day, exploring her world with joy and wonder. One morning, Eli noticed signs of distant travelers approaching the ranch. They were small figures in the distance, moving slowly across the dunes. Mara joined him, and together, they observed quietly. Eli felt a spark of excitement. Perhaps others could learn from their innovations, or maybe help would come when needed. The ranch had grown into a beacon of life in the desert, and the possibilities seemed endless. As the travelers drew closer, Eli realized something profound. Humans could survive in any environment, but what truly made them remarkable was their ability to improve, to innovate, and to build thriving communities from the harshest conditions. Their ranch was proof of that truth. A combination of human ingenuity, persistence, and care had created life where there had been little before. That evening, as the sun set, Eli, Mara, and Luma sat together outside. The desert was quiet, and a soft breeze carried the smell of warm sand and fresh water. Eli felt a deep contentment. Life was hard here, but it was also full of possibilities. They had turned a barren ranch into a thriving home, and in the process, discovered the strength, creativity, and resilience that made humans extraordinary. "You've changed everything," Eli said to Mara softly. "Not just the ranch, but our lives. Luma's future. It's brighter because of you." Mara smiled. "No, Eli. You've changed everything. I only guided you. Humans are remarkable because of what we do with what we have. And you, your courage, your ingenuity made this place flourish." Eli held Luma close, feeling her warmth against his chest. For the first time, he truly understood what it meant to thrive. Life was more than surviving. It was about creating, improving, and building a future worth living. And with human determination, ingenuity, and cooperation, even the harshest desert could become a place of hope and growth. The night deepened, stars twinkling across the clear sky. The desert was no longer empty or threatening. It was alive, full of life, possibility, and the promise of the future. Eli, Mara, and Luma sat quietly, knowing that together they had turned the impossible into reality. The ranch was more than a home now. It was a testament to human resilience, intelligence, and creativity. And as they watched the desert night, Eli understood that no matter what challenges the world presented, humans could adapt, thrive, and flourish, leaving a legacy of life in even the most unforgiving places. Luma laughed, reaching for the glowing horizon. And Eli smiled, knowing that her laughter was a sign of victory, hope, and a life well lived. The frontier was theirs, and together they would continue to grow, explore, and thrive.